But to understand everything better, we have to go a little back in our past. And we're going approximately 100 years back. 100 years ago, Croatia used to be part of one bigger country, and that bigger country was called Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was a big, multinational country with two capitals. One capital was Vienna, in today's Austria, and the second capital was Budapest, in today's Hungary. And when the First World War has started, this country was fighting together with the Ottoman Empire, what is today modern Turkey, and with the German Empire, what is today modern Germany. And when the First World War has ended 4 years later, this country was on the losing side in the war. And if you're a loser in the war, no one asks you anything, because the winners are those who are writing the history, and the winners are those who are deciding about everything. So we Croatians, we said to ourselves, we have more in common with Slovenians, with Serbians, with Bosniaks, with Montenegrins than we have with Hungarians and the Austrians. And we said to ourselves, let's go out of this country and let's create our own Slavic country. But we had a couple of problems. Where will be the capital of the country? Will it be here in Zagreb, which is economically most developed city in the country, or will it be in Belgrade, in today's Serbia, which was the biggest city in the country? Then we didn't know, will it be a republic or will it be monarchy? We didn't know what will be official religion in the country. Will it be Roman Catholicism, what we Croatians are, or will it be Orthodox, what Serbians are? Then we didn't know what will be official alphabet. We'll use Latin letters, which we're using here in Croatia, or we'll use Cyrillics, what they're using over there. And actually, we made the mistake number one, because we said to ourselves, let's unite, and we'll decide about everything in the meantime, how the time is going. Similar like a job contract. First you have to read everything, then you're signing. But here, we've done vice versa. And in the year 1918, the first Slavic country was created, and the country was firstly called Kingdom of Slovenes, Croats and Serbians. One more time, it was a multinational country. Capital of the country became Belgrade, in today's Serbia, and the dynasty who started to rule the country was a Serbian dynasty with a King Alexander on the throne. And we Croatians, we are always complaining that we are paying higher taxes, that there are no Croatian generals in the army, there are no Croatian ministers in government. We are somehow citizens of second class over here. And then this gentleman over here comes to his political stage. His name is Stjepan Radic, as it's written down on the statue, and today we have him on the banknote of 200 Croatian kuna. So if you remember the banknote you gave me a couple of minutes ago, it was the gentleman. So he decided to go to Belgrade, to Parliament, to talk about all the problems which are bothering us Croatians. He was also the Minister of Education in the country, and in the middle of his political speech in the Parliament in the year 1928, one Serbian member of the Parliament took out the gun from his pocket and he started to shoot. The Serbian member of the Parliament killed immediately 3 Croatian representatives. 2 of them, they were injured. One among injured was him. And after about 1 month, he has died. And for us Croatians, it was shocking, because how can you kill each other in the middle of the Parliament? Almost middle of 20th century. And we demanded that the justice from the king, but the king said, I don't know who has done it, why someone has done it, I don't have anything connected to it. But then king said, democracy, it is not a good thing. We have a parliament where we are killing each other. Let's cut down the parliament, and I, king, I will be top supreme ruler of our country. Then he said, Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, Macedonia, Montenegro, we are killing each other because of our differences. So he also decided to rename the country, and for the first time we took the new neutral name for the country, it became Kingdom of Yugoslavia. The name is very, very logical, because Yug in our South Slavic languages means south. Slavia, because we are Slavic people. So Yugoslavia will be union or community of South Slavic nations, South Slavic people, what we are over here. But we are now in the year 1930s. Hitler is rising in the power in Germany, and it is more than evident that the Second World War will start. So that's why this country, Kingdom of Yugoslavia, will become allied country with the Nazi Germany and with the Third Reich. And the Second World War won't start here in the year 1939, like everywhere else in the Europe. War will start 2 years later, in 1941. A little bit more about those events we'll talk in our next stop. We will talk much more about the Second World War, what happened over here. As I said, I know this million of data, million of names, million of years, million of things come into your brain, but you'll see how we walk in our tour that things will become logical, and you will see that things can happen over here with a reason and with a sense. Just 2 things, please, not to be confused. This Yugoslavia doesn't have anything in common with communist Yugoslavia. This was a kingdom that existed until 1941. Communist Yugoslavia was established only after the war. So only thing what they have in common is the name. The name is totally same, and more or less the territory of the country is same. If you compare this to the modern countries today, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia will be here now. But as I said, it was a very, very poor country. Predominantly, it was agricultural country. So this is also one of the reasons why you probably never heard, or maybe never learned even in the school, that country like this existed in the war. But you can see how the situation is becoming complicated. Easiest way how I like to explain the relation between us Croatians and Serbians, literally like a ping pong. Because the one who was ruling the country was crushing and killing other nations. In the period before Second World War, we Croatians, we were second-class citizens and we were the one who were victims. But in the Second World War, situation will change dramatically. And in the Second World War, we Croatians will be the bad guys who do the bad things over here towards the other nations. But just before leaving the spot, maybe some questions regarding something I was telling over here. As I said, after each and every spot, in the end of every stop, I will ask if there are questions just to make sure if everything is clear, and then we're continuing to the next one. So far so good, or maybe some questions?
Yes, everything's clear.
As I said, this is just introduction, this is just the basic. You'll see how things are just now complicated and how they will escalate in this 20th century. This is what I was telling to you. If you ever thought that history of your countries is complicated, welcome, and we are guests. But we're walking straight now and we'll turn left into the first street. So guys, Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939 when Hitler invaded first Poland, then Hitler invaded Belgium, France, Netherlands, and all the western part of the Europe. But Hitler needed to have the peace in his backyard. And suddenly, over here in Romania, Italians had problems, and Italians needed help and support. Hitler also wanted to get to Romania to get the fuel for his tanks and for the war industry, especially in the cities called Ploiești and Pitești around the Bucharest, where there are a lot of oil platforms and oil production. So what was the easiest way to go to Greece to help Italians, or to go to Romania to get a fuel for his tanks? Of course, it was through the small kingdom of Yugoslavia, and the country was totally unprepared for the war. And they were saying, why Hitler, our good friend Hitler, or ally Hitler, why he would come here and why he would attack us. Country was totally crushed within 10 days, and that's why the war is called 10 Days April War. King and royal family, they left to London, and they lived through the whole period of the Second World War in London, and they had government in exile, similar like Polish, Danish, Dutch, and many countries all over Europe. And suddenly over here, on the territory of Croatia, we didn't have anyone who was ruling our country. And we said to ourselves, after 1,000 years living under the rule of Hungarians, Austrians, Serbians, Italians, for the first time we can have our own Croatian country. And then the movement, what is becoming very, very important, it's called Ustaše movement. It comes from the verb ustati, and in Croatian ustati would be to stand up, to uprise. Even in the morning you can say to wake up with the same verb. And this gentleman over here, who was never smiling, was the leader of the movement, and his name was Ante Pavelić. Here in Croatia he had his title. His title in Croatian is poglavnik, and probably the word in Croatian doesn't mean anything to you, but if I translate to Italian, maybe it will have more sense. Duce, or if I say in German, Führer. Sounds familiar. And just by looking at the photos of his best friends, you can see what is political orientation of the country. Hitler and Mussolini. And today, for example, this letter U, what used to be the symbol of the country, is totally forbidden. It's equal to swastika in Germany, it's equal to fascia in Italy. But unfortunately, still today, often if you see graffiti with letter U, it's symbolizing this part of our history over here. The country, what was established over here, was called Independent State of Croatia. The country was everything but independent. Because if you look at the territory of the country, pretty much different than the modern Croatia today. It had the whole territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it didn't have a coast at all, because Italians always wanted to rule the whole coast of the Adriatic Sea. Then there was a line which was dividing the country into two parts. In the northern part, Germans were those who could exploit the country, take coal, cattle, people to be their slave workers, and in the southern parts, Italians could do the very same things. Personally, I will never tell you this is an independent country. I'll never tell you this will be a country I'll be proud of, because during this rule and during this time, we decided to implement the racial laws. Very same racial laws like they exist in the territory of Germany, in Poland. If you may be familiar with the term called Nuremberg laws, we also had it over here. And that's why we have this as our second stop on our tour, because here we didn't have the parking lot all the time back in our past. It was a place where Zagreb Jewish temple, the synagogue, used to stand over here. And that's why if you look under the blue letters, there is a memorial plaque which is commemorating the Jewish temple that stood here from 1867 to 1941 when it was destroyed. And probably you're familiar how Jews had to wear David's star or piece of the cloth and they were persecuted. Here it was totally same, here it was equal, but in our version Serbians had to wear a piece of the cloth with letter S, standing for Serbians. Because now we Croatians, we were good guys who had to make revenge for the last 20 or 30 years what Serbians have been crushing us over here. As I said earlier, ping pong between the nations. And this is something what is quite problematical and also something what is quite infamous connected to our independent state of Croatia. We're the only country allied to Nazi Germany, to Third Reich, where we had concentration camps. And concentration camps, they were not run by Gestapo or by SS, by us Croatians. And the only difference between our concentration camps over here and the one, for example, in Poland, Auschwitz or Majdanek or Sobibor, or in Germany, Bergen-Belsen or Mauthausen in Austria, is that we didn't have gas chambers. Everything else was totally the same. And please don't take me wrong, but at least in Poland, death was quick. And people died in gas chambers. Here people were suffering. They were taking the tongues of the people. They were cutting the fingers to the people. They were cutting the genitals. So, worst of the worst. So I know it sounds wrong, but at least in Poland people were not suffering. And at least it was that was quick. But not everyone here was in favor of this pro-Nazi regime. We also had strong anti-fascist movement and strong resistance, but a little more about this resistance I'll tell you on our next stop, on our next place in front of the tunnels. The biggest problem is that most of our top-ranked Nazis, or how do we call them, Ustaše, they managed to escape. Most of them, they escaped to South America, to Uruguay, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, like the rest of the crowd from Germany and Italy. For example, our leader, Ante Pavelic, he managed to escape to Buenos Aires, to Argentina, where the secret services of Yugoslavia found him in the year 1956. In the 1956, he escaped from Argentina to Spain, because Spain was under Franco regime, and Franco was far-right nationalistic movement. He died in the year 1959. Without any kind of trials, without any kind of persecution. And maybe the worst thing is that unfortunately still today we have people who are fighting who were the good guys and who were the bad guys during the war. And I will give here an example of Germany. In Germany there are big far-right parties called Pegida and AfD. Those far-right parties, they are small babies compared to our nationalists. And the problem over here is that we like to label people quite a lot. If you vote for left political parties, you're a communist. If you vote for right one, you're a fascist. So there's no being in the middle. Also the problem is that we were going from far right, for fascism, to far left, to deep communism, and then again to the far right. So we're a very, very young democracy. So still we need a time, and still there's a lot of processes what we have to do to become more mature society, like for example German, Dutch, Sweden, and countries in the western part of Europe. But as I said, not everyone here was in favor of it.
How far right is your current government, you'd say?
Government right now,
yeah.
You mean? Now it's called Croatian Democratic Union. It is center right, and they are counterparts with CDU in Germany, Christian Democrats. They are so they are not far rights, but they are more modest right. Now the good thing is that this government, what we had elections 1 month ago, it's quite strong. But for example, previous government was in coalition, and in this coalition were also the far right parties, and always those who were in the minority, they're always loudest. Yeah. And now it's better because of the whole situation, but earlier it was awful. It was awful, and I can openly say we had a couple of neo-Nazis in our government party. It's getting better, but it's getting better very, very slowly. As I said, not everyone here was in favor of it. A little more about resistance and struggle on our next topic here. Just before leaving, maybe questions about World War II, about something what I was talking over here. All fine? All good?
Just one.
Of course.
There is a number of how many people were dying in this period?
Very, very good question. Unfortunately, there isn't. Because if you look Croatian sources, Croatians will tell you that between 50 and 70,000 people were killed. Jews, Gypsies, Serbians, homosexuals, political opponents, everyone against regime. If you look Serbian numbers, Serbians will tell you between 150 and 200,000 killed. The biggest problem is that during the Second World War, Croatians have decided to destroy data and statistics. Then Germans, the Nazis have come, they destroyed the rest. And after the war, communists come on the power, and communists destroyed everything else. So today we don't have precise numbers. Some approximate numbers is between 90 and 120. Somewhere in the middle would be the realistic number, because always some truth is always in the middle. And I don't know if you ever had statistics in your university or in your high schools. I had it. The first thing what our professor of statistics told us, that statistics are the biggest lie. And depends what you want to show with the numbers. With the numbers you can show everything. It just depends who is a good guy and who is a bad guy. And depends which side and which source you're taking. Yeah. You have the different data and you have the different history over here. So that's why you always have to look the middle from both sides to have some general image of the truth. Very, very good question. That's why I wasn't going very much into this detail. And what you also see later in our tour, still today for a lot of things we don't have precise numbers. It's similar if I ask you how many people were working for Securitate in Romania. You don't have the numbers, or how many people were working for Stasi in East Germany. Still today we don't have the precise numbers, and probably will never have the numbers, because most of them they are destroyed, or most of them they were in hiding, and a lot of people don't want to talk about it. And it's the biggest problem if you're quiet. Because if you're quiet, you're not solving the problems. And problems are here for future generations, not over here. But maybe some other questions?
No,
if not, let's National Socialism movement. We also had strong resistance movement, and I don't know if you ever heard for the guy, but his name was Josip Broz Tito. Tito had a dual role during the Second World War. First role was that he was chairman of all partisan units, all partisan squads, and the second role was that he was a chairman of Communist Party, so he was the most important communist in the country. This is today something what people are taking very, very wrong, and they're thinking that all partisans were communists. No, they were not. Communists were just the most important and the most organized one. There were also a lot of Republicans, a lot of Democrats, a lot of liberals, and they were all under the organization of the communists. In the year 1943, Italy will surrender. 2 years later, in the year 1945, Nazi Germany will surrender, Third Reich will surrender, and officially Second World War will be over. Again, we had a problem. How the new country look like? Will we have the old kingdom, because if you remember, king and royal family, they were alive. They were living in London. Or we will have the new independent communist country, because communist partisans were those who had liberated the country from the occupators. For us, it was a little bit easier over here, because we didn't have a Red Army over here. We didn't have Soviet soldiers. We liberated ourselves from inside. And here we decided to have free elections. There was one small problem. You could vote for one political party. It was a communist party. Guess who has won the elections? Very logical, and I have a very smart group today. You wouldn't believe, Tito and communists, they have won the elections. And the country which was established over here was called Federative People's Republic of Yugoslavia, or from this moment now on, we're talking about a communist Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia, what you have heard about, Yugoslavia, what you already know, and what is also familiar to you. And in total, there were 6 different republics, and 6 republics were Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. And you can compare this 6 republics like 50 states in US. There were also 2 autonomous regions, and autonomous regions were formed where one nation didn't have ethnic majority. So one was here in the north, the region was called Vojvodina, where used to live Croatians, Serbians, Hungarians, Romanians, Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, Russians, whoever you can imagine. And the second one was here down, and it was called Kosovo, where used to live Albanians and the Serbians. More of the country became brotherhood and unity. And with this they wanted to say, no matter we're different, no matter we're talking different languages, no matter our mentality is different, together we'll be stronger, together we'll be united, and together we'll create one bigger and better society for all of us living over here. But if the country is ruled by one person, and if the one person decides about everything, is it dictatorship or not? Then if you want to succeed in your life, you need to have a small red book. Small red book show that you're a member of the party. And almost everyone who is working in the public sector needed to have this small red book. For example, my grandma, she was a teacher in school. Biology and chemistry, communism, something totally different. But she, like many other people, they said, I don't care about politics, give me this. This is the way how I can earn the money and how I can bring the food and the money back home on the table to my family. But when Yugoslavia was created in the year 1945, Stalin and Soviet Union, they were role models how perfect communist country should look like. But then Tito, They didn't want to have Stalin with his hands and his claws over him and over his country. So in the year 1948, they decided to break with all the relations and decided to dissolute. Now we know how it was possible for us to escape from Soviet Union, and for example Hungary in 1956 didn't do it, Czechoslovakia in 1968 also didn't do it. We've done this with support of the United States. What is even more important, US money. Yugoslavia was never part of Marshall Plans, and Marshall Plans were plans to rebuild Europe after the Second World War. But if you get the bag of sugar where it's written made in USA, or bag of corn where it's written made in USA, is this Marshall help or not? Officially it wasn't, but everyone knew who was sending the money inside of the country. And probably you're familiar with the terms called Cold War, the Iron Curtain. This is how the Europe and the world were divided in the second part of the 20th century. What you can see here in the red color, those were mostly communist countries under bigger influence of Soviet Union and so-called Warsaw Pact. Or here in the west, in the blue, countries that are bigger influence of the United States and NATO Pact. If you look where we were, Yugoslavians were here in the middle, and we were white, because Yugoslavia was officially neutral. Tito was a very, very good diplomat, and no one can deny it. Tito said we are communists, so we can trade with the East, with our communist friends, with our communist brothers. But at the same time, we're not such a hardcore, we're not hardline communists, we can trade with the West. We can earn on the both sides. We can get the money from both sides. And this is what Yugoslavia was, always something in the middle. For example, with the Yugoslav passport, you can travel both to East and also to West. My grandparents, they would often travel into Berlin. They would always sleep in Eastern Berlin, because it was cheaper. But 2 or 3 times in one day, they would cross the wall without any problem, without visa. Pass would be stamped, and they would shop in West Berlin. If you wanted to buy a car, you can buy Eastern cars. You can buy Ladas, Dacias, Škodas, everything what was produced in the Eastern bloc. But at the same time, you can buy the Western cars. For example, again, my grandparents, they had Opel. And Opel is a capitalistic country, car in a communist country. And this is what Yugoslavia was, something in the middle, something between. But Tito never wanted to say that we're more with the East or more with the West. So Tito decided to create a third thing, which was called non-aligned movement. This was mostly today third world countries or countries in development pact. In total there were 5 founding members. Founding members were Yugoslavia with Tito, Egypt with Nasser, then India with Nehru, Indonesia with Sukarno, and 5th one was Ghana, because Ghana was the first African country to gain independence from the British Royal Crown. And for all those countries, Yugoslavia was seen as a paradise on the earth because they were living in a perfect communist country where everyone is equal, where everyone has everything, but they had all the benefits from the Western world. But if you ask people today, was Yugoslavia good or was Yugoslavia bad, you'll get different opinion. Someone will tell you Tito was a god, some will tell you Tito was a bastard. Not everything is correct, not everything is wrong. And there are still today people who are saying it was better in the communism or it was worse in communism, similar like in Romania, similar like in ex-Eastern Germany. And at the beginning, firstly, some things which were good in the country. We had free education, free healthcare, and free hospitals. Thank God both of those 2 things are still free today, and we don't have to pay anything for education. Similar like in Germany, in Romania is free as well, or you have it's free. Those are still some very good things what we have from the communism. Then the country wanted to become self-sustainable, so they were producing whatever they could for themselves. They were even producing the cars. I don't know if you ever heard for the car. The car is called Yugo. It's one of the worst cars ever produced. And this was the car what almost every citizen could afford themselves. But what is a communism? Society where everyone is equal. Or they should be equal. In theory, super good. In practice, so-so. So while we, ordinary citizens, were driving this piece of, I'll leave for you to finish the sentence, Tito and party members, they were trying Mercedes, Bentleys, Rolls-Royce, Cadillacs, and other cars for the poor people. But majority of people were quiet, because they had 2 most important things. They had food in the mouth, they had the money in the pockets. So if you have those 2 things, people won't complain. Majority of people will be quiet. As I said, those are some things which were good in Yugoslavia. There were also some things which were totally bad in the country. Especially when the Second World War has ended, we Croatians were seen as the bad guys, because we were those who were working with the Nazis, we were those who were working with the enemies. So many of the Croatians were afraid what will happen to them, so they decided to escape to Austria, especially the southern Austria region called Carinthia, to surrender to the Britons. And they said, it's better to spend your whole life in British prison than to be killed by the communists. They went to Austria, they surrendered to them, but the Britons, very big gentlemen and very naive how they were, they told them, no, it's your internal problem. Go back to your country and solve it in a civilized way. We saw it in a super civilized way. Most people were killed. We are talking about 100,000 killed after the war. But again, we don't have precise numbers about it. And you're killed to be you're a soldier, you're an officer, you're a general, you're something. But also a lot of civilians were killed. Your cousin or your uncle was working for Germans. You were suing the uniforms to Germans. You were renting the apartment to Germans. Because after the war, we didn't have the normal trials over here. It was literally, you were with us, you were against us. And our trials were guilty. Done. End of the story. It was a big taboo topic, and everyone knew that something happened, but everyone was quiet. No one didn't want to talk about it. For example, my parents in the school, well, they were Yugoslavian, they never learned in the school something about this. Then we had working camps, pretty similar to Gulag.
So they didn't learn anything, so they didn't learn about the Ustasha regime?
Yes, they did. Of course, they did. But about those events after the war, what happened after the war. Because Ustasha regime, they learned, and it was learned that it was super bad thing, that they were glorious communists who helped them to help. But about aftermath of the war, they didn't. Then working camps, similar to gulags in Soviet Union, where you had to re-educate yourself to become a good and loyal member of society. And this is the photo of the most famous one. It's called Goli Otok. It's very close to Crkvenica.
We've been there.
You've been?
That bunker, prison, right?
Prison, exactly, the prison. And it's today one of the most famous one. What you had to do over there? You would take the stone from one part of the island. You would carry the stone to another part of the island. You take the hammer. With the hammer, you would broke the stone. You had 4 or 5 different stones. Each of those stones to the first part of the island. 5 years in a circle. 5 or 10 years in a circle. Imagine how brainwashed and mentally broken you are. But in the end, you're a very big sheep. And it's much easier to control the sheep than the people who are thinking in their heads. At the beginning, it was a prison for political opponents, so everyone against the communism. Also, a lot of communists who were more on side of Stalin and Soviet Union after they dissolved went over there. Later, in 60s, 70s, 90s, it was more prison, but still, it wasn't the best place to be, and it was one of the most cruel places to live. And to have everything in order, we had Secret Service, which was called UDBA, pretty similar to KGB in Russia, similar to Stasi in Germany, Securitate in Romania. But again, you have to bear in mind that our communism was much more relaxed. So if we say that KGB and Stasi and Securitate were here, our UDBA was here down. Because people are allowed to move the country, people are allowed to leave the country. We're not living in political prison like people are living in those countries. And again here, Tito was quite a smart guy. He said, okay, no problem, go to Germany, go to Austria, go to Switzerland, move. But you also have to send the money to the family, probably. If you send 100 marks or $100, for example, 70 will go to the family, 30 will be the tax that will go to the country. Win-win situation for everyone, because they would leave the country, family would get the money, and also country would earn the money. But people thought, Tito will never die, Tito will always be here, Tito will be our lifetime present, and he will always be here for us. But you wouldn't believe Tito has died. Come on, guy was 88 years old when he died. And when Tito has died, it was the most attended state funeral in the world history. Still today, it's one of the biggest one in the whole history.
The biggest what?
Funeral. More than 130 countries, state representatives, all the most influential politicians of early 1980s were at funeral. But today we can openly say when Tito has died in the year 1980, also Yugoslavia has died. Because after his death, country faced big economical crisis. Very, very soon came political crisis. As a result came social crisis. And as a result of everything have come the wars. If you put that in the modern perspective today, Venezuela. First it was economical, then it was political, then social. Now they're in social. Who knows what will be the aftermath of it? And right now we're in the year 1980. About the things what will happen after the Tito has died, we'll do in our basements. So maybe until this point, maybe some questions about Tito, about communism, about Yugoslavia, something we're talking over here.
I've actually got a question about your map.
Which one?
The one of the different Yugoslav states.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
About the flag, because I can see that this flag is really very similar to this one. Is there a reason for that?
So, red, blue and white, those are pan-Slavic colors.
Yeah.
So that's why the colors are the many flags. For example, still today this is Croatian flag. If you remove the star, and if you put the Croatian coat of the arms, we have the flag like this. In Slovenia, if you remove the star, if you put Slovenian coat of the arms, you have it. Serbia, it will be the totally same. The only one who didn't have their coat of the arms was Bosnia and Herzegovina and Macedonia, because here we're a mixture of Macedonians and Albanians. Here we're the mixture of Croatians, Serbians, and the Muslims. So if you have flags like this, you cannot say who is more important. So it was also quite political over here, but this was the official flag of the country.
But
so
the official flag was the same as the Croatian one.
No,
That's the other way around.
It's actually the other way around.
Ah, yeah, true.
see. So,
The color.
yeah, okay.
the different one. This would be Croatian. So just if you flip it,
Yeah.
and then you're getting the flag over here.
And why is Serbia and Montenegro in pink together?
Because later we will see Montenegrins were the only one who stood with the Serbians in the war, and also Montenegrin politicians were always very, very close to Serbians politicians, because even today in Montenegro around 43% of the population are Serbians. So almost half of the population are Serbians. They were always closest to Serbia than the other republics, the other regions. But you said you've been here only while in Croatia or also in Yugoslavia?
Only in Croatia.
Only Croatia.
I've been to all the countries.
But have you visited while it was independent countries or it was Yugoslavia?
No, independent countries.
Countries.
Last few years.
I'm always asking this question to get the answer, because it's always cool to get a different answer from the different people. Last year, when tourism still existed and we didn't have Corona over here, on a tour like this, I had two couples among the group. One couple was from Poland, another couple was from Germany. And I asked both couples how Yugoslavia looked for you. The couple from Poland, they told me it was beautiful. It was Western world. You were driving German cars, you were driving French cars, you were allowed to have German marks, US dollars in the hands, you were allowed to talk with the foreigners. It was freedom. It was Western world. When I asked the couple from Germany how it looked for you, they said, hi, it was nice, it was okay, people were super nice, but you still had black and white TVs. People were wearing funny clothes. It looked like Germany 20 or 30 years ago. And this is what Yugoslavia was. Compared to East, we're super rich and super developed. But compared to the West, we're totally poor. And we didn't have nothing. And just to show you how Yugoslavia was something between East and the West. For example, in Yugoslavia, we had small red books that they're members of Communist Party, we had communist regime, we had everything over here on one side. But on the other side, Yugoslavia was the only communist country that participated in Miss Universe. And Miss Universe is something totally different than the... totally different than it. Then, for example, Yugoslavia was the only communist country that participated in Eurovision, in Eurosong song contest. And things to be even complicated, Yugoslavia has won song contest in the year 1989, and this is the biggest irony in the whole situation. In the year 1990, song contest was held here in Zagreb, and it was won by Italian guy Toto Cotugno, who was singing the song Insieme, and Insieme will be together, united, and he was singing about uniting the Europe, how the Berlin Wall has fell down, there will be no more wars, so we will all live in freedom and in peace. Literally, 1 year, exactly. Yeah. 1 year later, the country was collapsing in the war, and a city where he was singing about the freedom was being bombed. This is the biggest irony, and still today, when I ask my parents, but didn't you expect the war will happen? I mean, after listening everything over here, it's more than logical. Still today, they will tell me, no, we never expected, because Germany was peaceful, Hungary was peaceful, Czechoslovakia was peaceful, Romania, more or less, you had a revolution over there, but it wasn't a war. We also thought it would be over here. And actually, we who were at the top, who were the most developed one, had the bloodiest. And our collapse of communism was the worst of all. But more about this in our basement would be the next one over here. Shall we go in the tunnels inside? Right now, we're built at the period of the Second World War, from 1943 to 1945, because as I said, we were on the wrong side in the war. And it was a shelter in the case of the air raids of the bombings. In the war, we also had small benches which were adjusted to the walls so people could sit down. Some numbers that are around 2,000 to 3,000 feet here in the tunnels, but sometimes when they were air raids, there were up to 5,000 to 6,000 people here in the tunnels. I saw that you also touch the walls. If you touch the walls of the tunnels, they're a little bit wet, because all around us is the natural ground and natural sources of underground waters are coming out. That's why there are those small holes on the floor. And the drainage system is everything for the water to leak out, and that's why the tunnels will always be wet. In the winter, it's always warmer in the tunnels than outside. In the summer, it's always much cooler and better, so like the natural air conditioning over here. And the tunnels were closed in the period of Yugoslavia. Then they were open again for the war in the 1990s. They were closed in the year 2016, and since 2016 they're open for us as a public, as it is today.
I hope it's not a sign or something.
Sorry?
I hope it's not a sign or something. That
Who knows where this is going right now. But now they're for us locals. The best thing about this town is that they're under a hill. Whereas our parliament, our government, the church, colorful rooftops, St. Mark Church, we didn't have to go on the hill, just go straight down through the hill. It's like a shortcut over here.
And were they used for anything during Yugoslav times, or were they just shut off?
You can answer in 1 minute.
Okay.
So the tunnels were always something mystical, and there were a lot of theories. But there are even more tunnels like this one. But this is one and only open for public. There's also a theory that's supposed to come directly from our government and parliament building over here in tunnels. But my personal opinion that the bastards who are sitting over there, they have such a much nicer for themselves with a little sofa, with a minibar, with a vineyard. This is just for us regular sheep and the peasants. Total length of the tunnel is approximately 2 kilometers. So if you thought this one was long and this one was big, when we come here to this hole, look into your left side, and you will see the biggest part. The usual reaction is oh, wow. And now this is the biggest part of the tunnel. As I said, there were 4 sides exits, like this one. We're now in the biggest hole, and the part of the tunnels where we're standing right now, this is the original size of the tunnel. Now comes my answer on your question. If you look over there, there is one bigger hole where the people are passing. The bigger hole is over here. We don't know for what it was used, but it was built during the communism. One of the rumors and one of the theories, I would say the most famous one, but also the most stupid one, is that it was the place where Yugoslav nuclear weapon was hidden. Yugoslavia never had nuclear weapon, but it's important to talk. Marketing is very important, and if you have good marketing, you'll sell absolutely everything. It's important to talk about everything, but probably it was some kind of storage for either for a weapon or for the food or for some emergency cases, but the weapon was never over here. We're walking in the direction over there of the tunnels, and still today we have some original inscriptions on the walls in the tunnels. Original inscriptions that were built. By the way, feel free to take as many photos as you want over here. For example, each and every of the walls in the tunnels had some kind of a purpose. And for example, on Croatian language, for the trash, we'll say otpadci. And this is information for the people who were hiding here in the Second World War. They can come here and they can throw the trash inside, because here once used to stood the big bin for the trash. And still today you can see the tunnels are super clean. There are no graffitis, there are no cameras, because we want to preserve those original inscriptions from the Second World War. As I said, trash, because here used to be a big bin. That next hole also had its own purpose. We see things differently. A couple times I had it, and I was like, when I had the people, because those people who are more familiar with the topic, they know what we're doing here. But hard. For a lot of people, it's still very hard to talk about. Guys, if someone needs a water, if you need to refill the bottle, even if you have the water, here is super cold water. If you're thirsty, feel free to drink it. Here in Croatia, the tap water is safe to drink. So wherever you are, feel free to drink the water without any problem. Toilet, someone needs to go? No. Okay.
What I noticed here in Croatia is it's very clean.
Yes.
It's one of the cleanest cities I've been to.
But one of the reasons is also our mentality, because if, for example, if you draw something, if you eat something and you throw it on the floor, it's very likely that someone will come to you. You forgot something.
Yeah.
Pick it up. It's in our mentality, in our tradition. So this is something good. This is good, and also something what we have very, very cool. It's very quiet. You won't see people screaming on the streets.
No, exactly.
If someone is screaming, it's either party or they are tourists. And those are some good things, but we have it here. Guys, we were walking forward here. Some good things, but we have it here in Armita. This what is clean. For example, this over here, this is the main market of the city.
Yeah.
Every day they're cleaning everything up. Every day they're putting everything up. They're still not finished, so they will clean everything. Every day setting up. Every day setting down. Every day cleaning. And look how it's now. And then when we finish with the tour, you'll see that everything will be clean, like nothing happened. By the way, just to show you how hot it is, if you put your hand, you can feel how it's melting. The concrete. How hot it is over here.
They are also having this in Romania.
And yeah, I read in the news that whole wave, heat wave, is coming out to the Europe. So
Again, I think last year also.
yes, it was also.
It's also
Where do you live in Romania?
Brașov,
In Brașov,
in the center.
I've been there.
Yeah?
Very, very nice city. And you have that big cross over the city on the hill. And over there, for the first time in my life, when I was in Brașov, I ate baklavas with chocolates. And
that's something Turkish.
but you have michi over there. And we're now in the year 1980. By the way, I'll be turning on and turning off the lights, so I don't know how it's easier for you to take the photos. Later we'll make the whole circle. I'll turn all the lights on so it can be easier for you to take the photo without any problem. We're now in the year 1980. Josip Broz Tito has died. And country suddenly faced a big economical crisis. People had to start to wait in line to buy the things, and for us it wasn't normal. For us it was the thing from Romania, from Poland, from Soviet Union. For us it wasn't. We didn't know that Tito was taking credits and loans both in the east but also in the west, and suddenly we had to pay that back, and there wasn't money. Country went even in the bigger crisis when the whole world happened something what was called oil crisis. And the situation in Yugoslavia was quite bad, and Yugoslavia decided to introduce the law which was called odd and even law. It was something like this. On the odd days in the month, 1st, 3rd, 15th, 21st, 27th, you were allowed to drive your car only if your car plates would end with the odd number. On the even days in the month, 2nd, 22nd, 28th, 30th, you were allowed to drive your car only if your car plates would end with the even number. Now there's something like this in the world, but because of pollution, because of the smoke, because of traffic, we had something like this because we didn't have enough fuel. The situation became even worse. So countries started to issue coupons like this one, and with each and every of those coupons, you were allowed to buy 10 liters of fuel per person per month. What can you do? I can see that you're not surprised at all. You're super surprised. It was something what was happening over here. And officially you were not allowed to, you couldn't buy. But on the black market, you can buy whatever you wanted. On the black market, it was everything. And this black market is also one of the reasons why the economy became unstable. Inflation started. The biggest banknote was the one of 5,000 Yugoslav dinar with Josip Broz Tito on it. But after a year or two, to buy the bread, you need to have 100,000. And after a year or two more, you need to have 1 million. Just to buy the bread. And people start to lose the money. People start seeing that something is bad and something is wrong in the country. So very, very soon from this economical crisis in the country, we also got political crisis as well. I like this disco. This lights up in my favorite part of the Lord tour. As I said, when Josip Broz Tito has died in the year 1980, we didn't have anyone who will rule the country, and Tito never said you, or you with the next leader of the country. So when he has died, we introduced something what later we'll see it was super stupid, and the thing was called rotating presidentship. It was something like this. In the year 1981, president was from Serbia, 82 Croatia, 83 Macedonia, 84 Slovenia, 85 Bosnia and Herzegovina, 86 Montenegro. Every year, president was a different person from a different country. Come on. It doesn't work. Especially if you mind that everyone will pull on the side of his country. And when the first cyclist has finished in the year 1986, Serbian Academy of Science and Arts, so the top Serbian scientific and art institution, said everyone is complaining too much and we have to do something. So they decided to make the plan how, according to them, Yugoslavia should look like. And this is the plan, what it looks like. Pretty different, right? Slovenia was left untouched because those are the only territories of Slovenia where Slovenians were living, and Slovenia was always the richest and the most developed one in the whole Yugoslavia. Croatia is shown here in red, and those are the only territories of Croatia which were never conquered by the Ottoman army and by the Turks back in the 15th, 16th century. Everything else is Serbia. There is no Macedonia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Everything is Serbia. And they said, where one Serbian lives, it is Serbian. And common, ordinary citizens said, politicians. They were fighting for the last 50 years, they will fight for the next 150 years. We, normal people, were living together and will always live together normally. But actually the problems start in the year 1986, when in the leading position of Serbian Communist Party will come the gentleman, but hard to say gentleman, who is maybe familiar to you, and his name is Slobodan Milošević. Milošević is one of the persons quite responsible for a lot of bad things that happened over here. And on one meeting, on one rally, Milošević said something what is written over here. And he said that now we, Serbians, are facing the new battles. Those are battles inside of our heads. But also we are not excluding the armed battles. And Milošević said, if one Serbian will get killed, Yugoslav People's Army will react. And he said it in the summer of 1989. Just 2 years later, we'll have this series of bloody and the brutal wars, what happened over here. Also, if you have to look in the context of the time, maybe three and a half months later, Berlin Wall fell down in October, November of 1989. So the situation in Europe will start to change. In December of 1989, there was a revolution in Romania. Ceausescu and Elena were killed. So also a lot of communists were afraid what will happen to them and what will be the future of Yugoslavia. So that's why they decided to have the meeting, just watch out not to fall around for it. They decided to have the meeting in Belgrade in the January of 1990. And at that meeting, and that Congress, they had to discuss about the future of Yugoslavia. Slovenians and Croatians, they were favoring the ideas of economical federation. Since Croatia and Slovenia were two richest republics, they were saying, if we give 10 as a tax, we want to get 10 back. Not 5 or 6 when you get really equally disperse the income. They laughed out, they are leaving the meeting. Macedonians and Bosniaks are saying, no, motto of our country is brotherhood and unity. If there are no Croatians, if there are no Slovenians, we also don't want to participate in this, and they are also leaving the meeting, and the meeting is finished just 2 days after its start. And today we are considering 22nd of January 1990 as the date when officially Yugoslavia has ended. The year is 1990. In Croatia, in Slovenia, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and in Macedonia, we had first free elections, and also we had referendums. Question here in Croatia was, do you want to have Croatia to be free and independent democratic country, or do you want to have Croatia to be part of Yugoslavian Federation? The referendum here in Croatia was passed 93% in favor of leaving Yugoslavia, but a referendum was boycotted by Serbians who were living over here. Because Serbian politicians were saying to them, do you remember 50 years ago, during the Second World War, when they had their independent country, what they have been doing to you? They were killing you. Now 50 years later, they will have again their independent country, they will kill you again. We can openly say that Serbians were brainwashed by Serbian politicians. But equally, our Croatian politicians were those who were spreading the hatred towards the population. And how did you come here in Zagreb? By car or plane? Or
by plane.
By plane. So when you have come in by plane in Zagreb, you have landed on Zagreb International Airport, which is called Franjo Tuđman International Airport. Mm-hmm. The airport is named after first Croatian president, and on the photo you can see him. That's why the airport is named after him. Mm-hmm. And today this is a disputable thing. Is he a good guy? Is he a father of modern Croatian country? Or is he a mass murderer and the one who is responsible for expelling a lot of Serbians, what we'll see a little bit later?
How many Serbians were living here in Croatia?
Before the war, I mean, we have it over here in the video, before the war it was 12% of the population. If we talk about numbers, around 500,000 Serbians were living over here. So What a number it was. And below right here, it's written, let's decide ourselves about the destiny of our Croatia. And with this, he wanted to say that only Croatians in Croatia can decide about the future of Croatia. So you can see that already something is boiling, it's cooking and it's heating up. The first problems will start in the summer of 1990. And the following year, the year will be 1991, we'll have the total war and the open chaos and things which are familiar today as Balkan Wars, Yugoslav Wars, or wars of breakup of Yugoslavia are just about to happen and just about to start over here. I would just like to ask you please to sit down. Now we'll watch some original videos and original materials from the early 1990s period. By the way, if you're doing, we have also the file of the video, so if you want, we can send you on the email to spare the battery.
Yeah.
Whoever you want. So this is the Yugoslavia, the communist Yugoslavia, what we were talking earlier about, Yugoslavia that existed here from 1945 till 1991. This over here is the epical map of Yugoslavia. Territories in yellow, those are territories where Croatians were majority. Those territories in pink are territories where Serbians were majority. And if you can see here in the middle, Bosnia and Herzegovina, there is something what is green. Those are territories where Muslims were majority. The first one was Operation Flash in the May of 1995. When the bigger part of occupied territory will be liberated, and as revenge, in Zagreb, the capital of the country, will be bombed for the second occasion, for the second time.
It is shocking that 50 years after World War II, we should be in a European city that is under attack. The minister and I today just visited the hospital. There are 400 children. We have a children's hospital that has been attacked, a theater that's been attacked. There are 400 children that are in the basement of this hospital. They've been put at risk from an intentional attack on a city. Their only word for it is barbaric, a clear violation of international law, a clear violation of the most basic elements of human decency. Also, one should understand what has gone on in the attacks yesterday and today. These are attacks with Orkan rockets containing cluster bombs. Cluster bombs are intended for one purpose, and that is to kill people. When you send them to the center of a city, you intend to kill lots of people. Furthermore, the timing of the attacks, not at night, but right in the middle of the day, today's attacks during the lunch hour, is further evidence that the sole, single purpose was to kill as many people as possible. It is an utter outrage.
About the revolution, about communism, so time heals everything, but it doesn't go overnight. Those are years and the years and the years of the process over here.
I'm not sure what kids are being taught in school right now. Also in Serbia and also in Croatia.
For example, when I was a kid here in school in the 1990s, we were taught that we Croatians, we were good guys, we done only good things, we were bad guys, they done only bad things. Now the situation is changing and we're getting both sides. But often what is problematical, often the teacher will tell you, look it in the books, look what is written in the books. Because the teachers don't want to have the different opinion, because they don't know what is the background of the family. Because still today there are a lot of kids or